I found on this page in the parts manual that there's this knockout bracket. My lathe didn't come with this, so I wanted to make one. I went ahead and I picked up 2 chunks of cast iron that I thought was about the right size, and I started kind of just guesstimating off of these and started drawing up the plans for it. I'd heard that if you email Clausing that they might actually give you prints for the parts, and I had these part numbers on at least these 2 here. I figured I could figure these parts out fairly simply, so I didn't bother with that. So I sent them an email and asked them if I could get the prints for those, and they said, sure, as long as it's a part that's out of manufacture, then they'll go ahead and send prints for them. And that's what I've got here. So they actually sent these. These are dated 69, 70, and 72 with all of the different parts or different dimensions. This one here had some dates on it. They're pretty hard to read. I think 69 again as well. So this kind of gave me some basic ideas of, well, not just basic ideas, but exact dimensions of what this part was going to be. So I went ahead and took these and went into Fusion and kind of redid the drawings using the same dimensions so that I would have a little bit better view of what the final part is supposed to look like. And working off of these parts, I went ahead and made a mock-up out of MDF to see exactly the size and everything, what all it was going to look like. And this particular one I actually kind of cracked a little bit because I threaded all the holes and everything. I actually made this work and was able to mount this on the lathe and get it to actually work. Of course, being MDF, it's not really strong enough to last. It kicked it out a couple of times. Let me know that my clutch wasn't in ideal adjustment. I actually did some adjustments on that. So next up will be to actually machine these out of the cast iron, which will involve cutting this guy down the center. Already done. I'm going to go ahead and surface this off and getting it nice and flat and getting it to thickness. We're on the mill. First thing I want to do is just sweep in my vise, make sure it's good and square, which it seems to be good, hasn't moved. Next I want to get some parallels. Make sure they'll work. Little tap, tap, tap. Next up, I'm going to use the tool that's closest that I've got to a fly cutter. Alright, pretty much all the bandsaw marks are out. There might be a little bit of one, I don't know if you can see it right there, but I can go ahead and I'll cut the part out of this side. Alright, so next up I'm going to go ahead and start laying out some of these dimensions onto one of the sides. Get it glued up. Alright, well that's drying. Call the first dimension here actually, before I start on that, I didn't mill any of these edges. I'm gonna go do that now. Alright, through the magic of editing, I've went ahead and got this guy squared up. Didn't bother about this edge, but all these other edges have been milled off and are now nice and square. So just to do some quick layouts, I'm going to go ahead and lay out this 175. And I'll lay out 250. Alright, all of the rest of these dimensions actually come off of this line here. I'm going to go ahead and trim these out on the bandsaw and then mill these two dimensions. Get those to the correct size. Well, it seems Bozo came and got me. I'll have to go through and review the previous footage when I did this layout, because I was following the dimensions here. Somehow, one of these I think is fairly obvious. The width here, I'm guessing when I was doing this I just ended up 100 thou off. I think I was at 650 instead of 750. When I tried to get the 1.750, I think I was at 1.650, and I scribed that line wrong. For this direction, Somehow I just ended up a couple of thou off. If I actually go right to my scribe line, no, I'm almost 100 thou off on that one too. So I must have done that twice. I'm not really exactly sure how. I actually just went through my gauge blocks. This is a 2-inch gauge block and a 500 thou gauge block. So if I go up to 2.5, looking on there, I'm at 2.5. I am just slightly over. There's a thou over, and I clear. I go right on 0. There, it clears. I go even a half a thou, halfway between two markers. It touches. So my height gauge is good. It's just apparently measuring 100 thou off. I'm going to go ahead and just consider those nominal, while I will end up being slightly narrower here on each side, and I'm going to take the shorter end off of the bottom here. So I still think everything will end up okay. I'll have to adjust this radius slightly, but everything else is just off the center line for this guy. So I'll have to adjust my center line, this radius, and these edges will be slightly smaller. Looking at 1.58, we'll just divide that in half. So this will be 0.79, and this radius will be 0.79. Alright, everything else here should be fine. So first I will go ahead and set the gauge to 790 thousandths. And then the way I'm going to verify that 790, since it should be the exact halfway point, I scribe here, I get a good solid line. I should be able to flip it over and get that same line. And I hit it perfectly. So these next dimensions should all be correct for what they are. So 0.1875, mark that cross. Should be able to see that. I'm going to go ahead and do the 790, which will be the center of the radius. You can double check that because that's the same as this halfway mark, which came out right. That will be my access point for drawing the radius of this here. Let's go ahead and double check this. Looks really close. 790, 11875. Looks really close. So I can't really get an exact measurement. Calipers aren't really the best for precision measuring anyway, but they're getting me where at least I know I'm in the right ballpark and I'm not a full turn on the height gauge off, which is where I was having trouble before. So the next one is the center line of the chamfer here, which is another 750. While I have that up, I'm going to go ahead and scribe this direction as well. And that's just putting a scratch . in the steel. I don't have that blued up, so I don't know if that's going to show up. Looks like it might actually show up okay. So the depth of that should be 0.625 coming in this way. So let me drop this back down, put it face down this way, and I'm going to cross that last scribe line. I'm going to go ahead and draw my circle. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and drill holes and tap these. Next up, we'll get it in the vise and I'll cut out the groove right here. Alright, so here's my new setup. Much more practical. If you take a look at my old setup, it's pretty terrible. I don't know what I was thinking when I set this up. It seemed to be I was trying to make the most complicated setup I possibly could. In the end, I had this guy anyway. I recently got him. I can set him up here, zero him, clamp him in here, and tap him in until he's close. Now the last thing to do is to get this radius, and I'm going to do that on the belt grinder. So I built this grinder. I actually built this really cool radius grinder that'll mount in here. You can line up with the hole. I've got a few different pins that I've created that I can put in here for different sizes. The only problem with this particular part is that the hole isn't in the center of the radius. The center of the radius is about right here. So this one I'm going to have to do freehand. Won't be able to use the jig. swap out for a finer belt, get a nicer edge on it. So as far as amateur machining parts go, I think this guy came out fairly good. It's got a nice feel in the hand, you know, no sharp edges, everything's nice and rounded off. It's got a decent surface finish over the whole thing because of course I hit it with 220 belt. So overall, I'm pretty happy with it. Now that I've got a little bit of practice in place, I've got the much more complicated part to create. So we'll see you next time when we start on this guy.